Reports at TopVelocity.net. 3x pitch BioMetrics here. Joseph coming out of leg lift here. You can see Joseph trying to stay closed with the front side and loading down, but not really abducting the hip. So if we go to the, see if we can look at hip movement graph. Oh, that's movement. Let's see if we can go to looking at positions, hip angles. There we are. So we can see right abduction, adduction, which is the green. You can see it's at a -2 here. So as we want the hips to move forward and down at the same rate, so right before leg drive, we've got a good, say, 30-40 degrees abduction. That's where that femur's turned out and that hips open up. So it looks like tight abduction is not really allowing the leg to stay in torsion and the hips to keep their forward movements. If we look at the drawing tool, show you real quick, the femur should be in this position to the tibia here. So you have an abduction angle. If this is the middle of the pelvis, you have this abduction angle around 30-40 degrees. That's right now around like 12 or so. So we're collapsing this back knee. So we want to move hips forward and down the same rate. We want to feel that hip abduct, or that femur to move away from the body, not stay underneath the body. That's going to allow us to keep, like we said, our forward momentum going, which is going to be critical, accelerating into front foot strike. So you can see when Joseph goes to open here, back leg tries to push, but not explosive. So at front foot strike, about right here, the weight is back, but there's no force through the hips. So there's nothing driving the hips. The hips are still completely closed at this point. So the challenge is getting acceleration to here. So this is the point where all the energy should be in the body, and it looks like the backside is just collapsed in this position, and the hips aren't rotating. So if we look at the hip line, shoulder line, to get an idea of separation, they're not separated at this point. So if those hips were open, we'd have good separation because the shoulder's closed. And one thing, as Joseph said, he throws a lot harder in the outfield, and it's probably because at this point when he lands, the hips are open and the back leg isn't collapsed like on the mountain. So that's why keeping that femur abducted as you move forward and down the same rate, and trying to get power in the front foot, so where you hit front foot and the hips are powering open, back legs fully extended, explosive. You know, you're dragging your foot, and all your momentum's being launched over your front leg. So when we see this lack of backside power, we look at the kinematic sequencing, and it's interesting because we want to see the hips go first, and the red dot is the hips. So this has everything sequences in rotation. We want to see the hips go first, and right now the glove's going first. So this is what I call a reverse sequence. We want the hips, then glove trunk, and we're seeing glove, trunk, and then hips are peaking. So you can see how late the hips are coming through. We've got to right here, we've got to have that red line, that red dot peaking, and then over here the hips and trunk, or not the hips and trunk, the trunk and glove are going together. So this is really not only no separation, this is called a negative separation, because you can see at this point the shoulders are considerably farther ahead of the hips. And because of that, the arm's dragging, which is hard on the arm at this point. You can see the arm is pulling behind the scapular plane, the elbow is, which is really hard on the arm. So if we look at this is the linear kinematic sequencing. You can see the same thing here. The trunk goes forward first right here with the green, and then the red's peaking here. So the hips are peaking after the trunk. So here comes the glove, same thing, glove, trunk, hips. And it's interesting because as the arm is going into, the arm's, looks like it's releasing early, but as the arm is releasing the ball here, all the forward trunk is pretty much shut off. So it's all because of this backside collapsing, not powering, not driving the hips, not allowing it to separate. The shoulders are staying back. Everything's staying back and closed well, but there's no energy going through the hip. And so that glove's trying to tuck down early, and everything's trying to spin and pull off. So if we go to the linear, or out of the linear, and we go to the trunk orientation, we see at pitch release 31, 32 degrees of contralateral tilt to the glove side. That's excessive, and you can see the arm even elbow starting to extend. This is another thing that's hard on the arm. So dragging the arm because the hips are late is hard, and then pulling past 25 degrees to the contralateral side is hard on the arm. It's also an indication there's a lot of rotation from that glove side, really pulling everything around because that back hip isn't driving. The back hip is so tight and so, dead at this point here, it even gets behind the trunk when it should be driving the trunk. So I think this is really the key thing: learning to abduct, keeping the forward momentum out of the hips, and trying to get these hips to drive open by getting more explosive, getting more mobility, because the shoulder orientation is good, and I think the glove side will calm down once you get the hips to drive. And once you get to drive, it's going to be like being in the outfield when you can crow hop and you get that momentum going, and you can get all that energy through your backside, through your back hip, and then your ball speed picks up. You'll be able to do that here once you get the back leg explosive, the hips to open and drive powerfully ahead of the trunk. That's going to be key.